Welcome everyone to the Dream Builders podcast. I am super excited for this new and inspiring episode about the steps you can take to become closer to realizing and standing in your own truth and sharing that with love, courage, and dignity. And that's exactly where my next guest is all about. So I'm beyond excited to introduce to you Prana Muggerud. Pia is a woman's personal mastery and leadership coach, a holistic counselor, a biodynamic breathwork and trauma release practitioner. Her mission is to reignite women who have abandoned themselves and now want to come out of hiding and claim their rightful place in the world. Pia is also the co-author of the book She Rises for Tomorrow, Female Entrepreneurs Who Brought Ideas to Life and Inspire the World. Pia, thank you so much for coming on the Dream Builders podcast.
Well, as I was just saying to you before we started recording, I love the topics that we're going to be talking about, but more specifically, I really love the quality of what you're bringing to the world through your podcast. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming here, Pia. So, like we just talked about, I wrote down a couple of topics. I wrote down personal leadership. I wrote down values, I wrote down confidence and congruence. So these are definitely some of the topics I would love to talk with you about. But first of all, I would love to hear a little bit more about your backstory, because last time you actually told me that you became a coach out of your own, the own obstacles that you found in your life. So I found that very interesting. So if you could tell a little bit more about your backstory, that would be awesome.
For sure. And yes, I didn't, at the moment, I'm a trained, I've got, if there were letters after my name, there'd be a lot, because, I trained as a coach almost 20 years ago. I've trained in a number of therapeutic modalities, including, as you said in your introduction, biodynamic breath and trauma release, which is a trauma-informed type of breath work, and counseling and various other things, and that's all actually born out of my own struggles and my own challenges, and also growing up in a household where there were challenges. So it took me really having kind of hitting the wall to realize that, wow, I couldn't be more inauthentic. I couldn't be more out of congruency with myself and in my life than what I'd been living. And that was a massive wake-up call for me. And so, of course, then these topics are quite dear to my heart, because, I actually studied design in university, and out of a sort of flukish kind of experience, I moved to Hong Kong 25 years ago. So I've been living in Hong Kong for 25 years, and that was a place where, although I came with this design background, what I realized that it's a city that has a big yes. It has a big yes to entrepreneurship. It has a big yes to whatever you want to bring to the world. And so I realized that, well, hey, as I went through these difficulties and I started reaching out for support for myself through it started with counseling, and then I was introduced to a wonderful coach in Hong Kong, and I was so inspired by both my counselor and my coach that I decided to train as a coach. And what's wonderful about having lived where I've been living is that just because I have a diploma that says this is what I'm trained to do, I could reinvent myself. And because I felt such a beautiful opening inside of myself, inside of authenticity, and slowly kind of meeting myself really for the first time through this inner work I was doing, and seeing that, wow, there's this whole other world inside of me that I hadn't touched. And that's really where then I started this journey of becoming a coach and a counselor and doing therapeutic work. And it almost became like a need, like an inner need of constantly looking for what else can I find out about myself? What else, what other kind of stones are left unturned? And so when I would say, I've been working in the corporate world as well as not corporate world, but for the last 15 years, I've been working with leaders and in anything from presentation skills to culture change to any kind of leadership skill that you might need. And that's when I got also very curious about leadership, and not necessarily just leadership as you might see it in the dictionary, but what I refer to as personal leadership. And it goes hand in hand with what I've been doing for myself over all these years. And that is to really meet the world from the inside and being internally informed. What does that mean? It means that what I've seen over the years is, for most of us, for many of us, including the leaders I've worked with in the corporate world, is that we are informed. The world informs us about how we can respond to the world by seeing what's happening outside of ourselves. And what I've learned over many years now is that's not where leadership starts. And that's why I call it personal leadership, because it starts, I call personal leadership is also, it's an inside job. It's getting up close and personal with yourself so that you can know, who am I really? What do I stand for? And like you mentioned, some of the words like, what are my values? And how can I show up and be congruent for myself so that I don't just lead myself, but also for those people that do lead other people, they can do that more effectively. But in my world, I very often work with people that aren't your typical leaders. It's all about, how can I lead myself? How can I live with congruency, with a sense of deep understanding of knowing who I am? And from there, then I can really live an authentic life. And it's simple and yet not so simple, because the inner journey, of course, takes time. But what you get to experience, in my experiences, when people really take that journey, life actually becomes easier, and life becomes filled with more joy and also more certainty. And in that place, you don't necessarily have to hold on to having certainty, because the certainty actually comes from the inside, because of the things that really matter are on the inside. So it's been quite a journey for me, and my own inner work hasn't stopped. So I continue for myself, because I see the value that it brings me, and even more, not more importantly, but I see the value that it brings to all my relationships, be it my family or husband, be it friends, or then all those work relationships. And that could be colleagues, or it could be those people that I serve. So I know that was quite a long 2 sentences about how I got to be where I am right now, but I kind of started to touch upon some of these topics that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Tia. And you mentioned a couple of very interesting things that I really loved about, understanding who you are at the core of your being, and also that you said that your own inner journey, you haven't stopped exploring who you really are. And I think that's very important for everyone to know, that it's not like, oh, one day you just find your purpose and that's, for example, it, right? There's always this constant evolving and growing of who you are. And I think that's very cool. Now, in the beginning, you mentioned that you couldn't be more inauthentic and out of congruency with yourself. Now, how did you kind of find your purpose in that way when you work like that through your own path of personal leadership? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. This wall that I hit, which was over 20 years ago now, I would call it that I went through a depression. Not severe, but enough to really go to a dark place. And I realized, and it took a long time for me to realize, and I actually needed to ask for support in order to start seeing this. But what I realized is that I had been so busy looking outside of myself for how to live in the world. And for example, and I still am quite a rules-based person, but I grew up with a lot of rules. And so what that looked like for me, more importantly in my adult life, is that I didn't, if I was asked to do something or asked a question, I didn't necessarily check in with myself, really getting a sense of what's the answer in this moment for myself. Instead, I kind of went through a mental checklist of what rules might I need to follow in this situation. And in addition, I was somebody who I actually call myself a recovering good girl, because I also I lived a life not just in childhood but also in adulthood where I was very much a pleaser, and I would kind of bend over backwards to go and please other people. But in the process, I lost touch with, well, what was important for me, and I lost touch with, well, what do I think is right and what do I think is wrong? So when I said I was living a very inauthentic life, is that because I was living somebody else's life, and it took many, many years for me to really get the kind of clarity that I have now. And that involves things like what would I tolerate? So I started building personal boundaries, for example, which I totally lacked before. And that and boundaries are really almost like, you know, the white picket fence of a nice country house, but it's like having a fence around you, so you know what belongs to you, and then others know what belongs to them. And so in my case, I had no boundaries, and part of that then meant that I became a bit of a doormat and allowed people to walk all over me, and could easily get quite taken advantage of. But it all came from this place of, oh, I just have to help other people. Had no idea that what I was really doing was a great disservice to myself, but also, of course, those other people. And so it took me a while, but I really learned to kind of really have an internal relationship with myself. And of course, I still, of course, want to be kind to other people. Kindness is certainly one of my personal values, but now it starts with me and it doesn't start with other people. And so now I very much feel like I am in congruency with who I am, who I am in relationship to what I say and what I do. And what that looks like is that I know what's right and wrong for me. And maybe once in a while I get that wrong. Because like I said at the beginning, I'm a work in progress, I think, like all of us. But in the process now, I can much easier than before recognize that, oops, I took a wrong step here, and admit to myself and perhaps the other person that I got it wrong. So now, for example, I don't go into some awful shame experience of having made a mistake. Instead, I go, okay, that I took a wrong turn here. Let's backtrack and see what's the right turn. And I figure it out. And that's so relaxing, because I give myself a bit of a break. But also, I don't know if you've heard, people say that it's much easier to be truthful than to lie, because if you lie, you have to always remember what you said, right? And
exactly.
now I'm not lying to myself anymore. And so therefore, I could very easily just boom, check in. And meditation is a really big part of my personal practice, as well as how I work with people. But I can check in, and then the answer's there. I don't have to figure it out with you or ask you or worry that I'm going to do something wrong, because the answers are all here.
Yeah, beautiful. The answers are all here. I love that, what you say. They are inside of you. Now, you said that meditation is quite like a practice that you do with yourself and also with your clients. I would love to know, like, what kind of meditation practice is it that you do or recommend to become more in congruency with ourselves?
Well, breath is life. And so often I will do something as simple as just focus on my breath. And it's as simple as breathe in through your nose. And even if you can, even notice how how it feels inside your nose as the breath goes in. and you just maybe spend 3 minutes just as a start. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. I mean, I use many different techniques. I just wanted to bring breath as a
Hmm.
first, because, for example, my dad, he always says to me, "Oh, I don't know how to meditate. You know, my mind is always there." And it doesn't mean that the voices in the head are going to disappear. I mean, maybe if you're sitting on a mountaintop in the Himalayan mountains and there's nobody else around, and no irritations from bad drivers in the city, or your kids nagging you or whatever, it's like you have a very ideal situation. This is more for people that are in the marketplace, like you and I. We're living with other people, and so breath is, of course, I'm a breath worker as well. So that's a, but long before that, I use breath. And one of the important things about breath is that very often people don't breathe very, very deeply. Often it's happening right up here, which is good for mere survival. But you want to bring the breath down into the belly. You want to engage the diaphragm. And as you breathe much more deeply, what happens is you start feeling more. And one of the reasons I have found in my experience is that people tend to breathe more shallow because they don't want to feel. So the more deeply you breathe, that's also an invitation to feel more. But that's actually also coming back to the conversation we were having just a few minutes ago about coming back to yourself and becoming more intimate with yourself. Intimacy is into me see, right? So breath is a wonderful way to do that, right? And so one of the beautiful experiences I had maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was running a 3-day leadership training with a very large international investment bank. And they included mindfulness and meditation in the early morning, 8 a.m. Before the main session started, we would do meditation practices. And we would do I taught them a few simple breathing techniques. And I also did a guided meditation. And these days, you can actually there's a few free and not free apps. For example, there's one called Calm, for example, where you can just listen to a guided meditation. And the beauty of that is you don't have to be an expert. You just need to listen to the words of the person doing the guided meditation. And for example, when I'm doing either coaching or counseling, I will always start with a guided meditation so that we sort of landing in this moment. And at the end of the day, meditation is simply being here and now, right? That's all you need. So even if a few thoughts come, okay, I'm just going to come back to my breath again. And what the experience was at the end, I didn't want to go into a big conversation, but I just asked them, just say one word about how you're feeling after this meditation. And there would be maybe a group of 20 in the room, right? And I also invited people to just nod if they didn't want to speak because they were in such a delicious silent space. And very often people would, just for 8 minutes guided meditation, they would say, oh, I feel expanded. I feel alive, I feel grounded, I feel myself. And so often it's a lot less complicated to do meditation than people think it is. But if anybody asks, I would always say to start with sitting silently and watching your breath. And if you can do that for 1 minute, then go for 2, then go for 3. And then start to see how, something starts both calming and becoming alive. This kind of oxymoron of both. And it's beautiful.
Thank you, Pia, for sharing. I also think it's like starting with breath work. It sounds so simple, but for many people, we haven't used to learn how to breathe at all since we were young. So that's true, right? We never used to learn it in school. So, and breath work is such an integral part of, of who we are and what we can do with that as humans. So thank you for sharing that simple tip.
Yeah,
Start with
my
it.
pleasure.
Now, I would love to talk about, because I know you're also a lot about that, like how people can go from, let's say, from hiding to really start living their truth on a daily basis and making an impact. So how did you, for example, really develop more confidence within yourself to really start living out who you truly are?
It was a slow process, actually. And I remember when I started having counseling all those years ago, and friends were very challenged by the changes that was happening in me. So that was a little bit of a painful journey for me. And I realized that, sometimes perhaps I have to choose myself before others, because some people kept on like challenging me and kind of going, what are you doing? And I think often change is something that a lot of people are scared of, right? And so we like to know that people are going to stay, our friends stay the same, and because then we can relate to them in a better way. And so for me, it took a while, because there was also a little bit of a shame around the challenges that I'd gone through, a little bit of shame around having to ask for help. But for me, it took really being with a professional and really starting to put into words what I was feeling, because I didn't really know myself. Because like I said earlier, I was so incongruent and out of contact with myself. So I had to start learning with my counselor to put words to what I'd been feeling and what was going on for me. And as I practiced with her, it became then more easy for me to start expressing these changes and what was going on for me inside. And that was really building my confidence. And I suppose also later on, one thing that also became really important for me is to understand what's important for me. And part of that is to get really clear about my personal boundaries. Not boundaries, personal values. And values are simply what's important to you. And what they do, they're like an inner compass where if I need to make a decision, I can check in with what my personal values are, and that will help me, to make that decision. So values, they guide our decisions. And over the years, having worked quite a lot with people on values, most people, including people that are leaders, but people that are just busy in their lives, very often they don't stop to really take time to delve inside, even to something as, I would say, fairly simple or basic as personal values. Most people are busy in their life. They're busy taking care of kids, or they've got accountabilities in their work. And so they don't stop to really ask themselves, who am I really? What's important to me? And I've also seen this as I got really clear about my values, and as I got clear, when I work with people and see they get clear about their values, then in addition, it's easier then to start knowing, well, what's okay for me and what isn't. And that's also where boundaries, personal boundaries, become an important part of the equation, because then you start learning to say no, or knowing when it's really, I have a yes for this and I have a no. And as people start experiencing you, for example, one of my top values is kindness. And so then also when people start seeing how I respond to them, because values are very much they don't change much. They might be a little bit different in the workplace versus personal, but ideally there should be a common ground there. And so then people kind of know what to expect from you. And that I also know what to expect from myself. And so the confidence really came from having somebody to practice verbalizing what was going on for me. And then I can bring that to my friends and family, but then also having to delve a little bit more deeply, as in the inner makeup of who I am. And so now, for example, when I work with people, I actually have a process that I call my inner compass. And that really is about, instead of always looking to see, what is my husband needing right now? Let me see how I can have his needs met. I go inside first, and then I can meet perhaps those people that I'm working with, or those people that are close to me. We can kind of find a way that that we can somehow work together. And it's like I said earlier, it wasn't particularly a quick process, but the length of it was also just really becoming reacquainted with who I was. And I think for a lot of people that would be the same case, because a lot of people just don't take the time to really ask those important sort of inner existential questions. And that's really, I think, more than anything right now, it's so important for anybody to really have an inner relationship with themselves, so that then that congruency can be met with the outside world.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Pia. Now, I have to say as well that, by identifying my own values was very relevant for me when I was, working in corporate and I felt stuck. Like, identifying my values and getting that completely clear, like my top values, was a huge kind of eye-opening thing for me, because I actually thought to myself, like, hey, I am working on an office with about 200 square meters where I feel stuck, and my values, when I wrote them down, they were about adventure. They were about they were about making dreams coming true and finding like-minded communities of people who were, building their dreams and living out their true selves and so on. And it was exactly not the kind of things I was seeing back in what I was doing at the office. So, so I totally resonate with that, and it really helps you as well to build that orientation in life. So getting kind of clear on what are the kind of important decisions that you want to shape in your life, but also what you said, like escape your, I didn't know if you were talking about conditioning, but at least escape that patterns of, of your culture and what your school and family have like told you once you were young. So this is a really cool thing that you said about the values. I completely resonate with that. And so making the bridge there, you also talked about personal boundaries. And I think that's also a very important one for living out who we truly are. Do you perhaps have some tips for people on how they can actually define how to learn to say no? Or like, do you understand what I mean? Yeah.
I totally understand what you mean.
Awesome.
It's not a specifically easy question to answer, but let me give it my best shot. One of the part of my journey also is that I lived very much in my head, and I see this a lot, and what my journey was to also then start including the rest of my body. And part of that is to start listening to the cues that the body gives you, because often it's like, oh, I'll just say yes because that's what's expected from me. Or maybe I just don't know what my answer is, and then I just go with the flow. Oh, I'm easygoing, I'll just do whatever you say. That's an easy, and that's actually, I would often say this, oh, I'm easygoing, because I didn't actually know. And to start having a relationship with your body, and I don't just mean, oh, I have a shower in the morning or I brush my teeth. It's about really becoming sensitive to when the body communicates with you. Because it could be something like, oh, I'm just noticing that I was just asked for somebody to, that if I could do something. And now I'm noticing that my belly has a bit of a knot, there's a tension. Or, oh, just now, maybe there's a butterfly feeling. Or maybe I notice a tension in the shoulder, and the list goes on. The senses in the body, they have language. It's called felt sense. And if what I started learning was to listen to those subtle cues, and giving myself also the opportunity to not, let's say, if somebody asks me something, to not answer immediately. Maybe take a breath or two and to feel what is right for me right now. And I think for people like me, who was very much a yes person, I did actually when I started learning about boundaries, I was given an exercise by my counselor at the time which was a fantastic exercise. And she just said, I want you to say no as many times as you can
Oh, that's
in
great.
your day. And as a yes person, I was mortified. However, adding a little bit at the end of a no. So, hey, do you want to come out tonight? Simple question. You know, no, thank you so much for inviting me. However, right now, that's not really in alignment with what I need right now. Or it could be, Nora, thank you for asking. However, I would like to stay home tonight. And not feeling like you need to give anybody a reason even. Thanks for inviting me. Tonight is not a good time for me. Right? So just state your truth without feeling like you have to justify your no. But to start practicing simple places of saying no. Would you like a glass of water? No, thanks. Even maybe 5 minutes later, actually, I'm really thirsty.
Yeah, exactly.
But just to utter that simple word, because for most of us, for many rather, it can be tricky. But really to kind of feel that there's another exercise where, let's say let's say that you are with a group of friends, and I would just come towards my friends, and then I would just walk very slowly and see what's the distance that feels okay right now. This feels more like a sort of obvious boundary exercise, but just kind of how close would I like to be with somebody right now? And that can change moment to moment. And why this is also important, let's say for people that are not just like you and I, we are entrepreneurs, but also people that are let's say have a job, to it's very easy to get overworked or do things that are not inside of your job scope because you cannot say no. So the gifts of learning to say no is one small part of boundaries, but it's helping you to know what belongs to you and know what isn't your responsibility. And part of that would actually support you in reducing stress, because now you're not worrying about, you're not, for example, working too much because you're taking on too much, or you're not, you know, having this dialogue in your mind because, oh my God, I said no and I should have said yes, and oh, you're so stupid, you should have said, there's so many things that by just saying no, you can get so much freedom inside and relaxation. And I think that's probably a great cocktail for all of us. Inner freedom and relaxation. That's really what boundaries will give you.
Thank you for sharing that, Pia. I think it is so relevant because most of the time what you say is like we always have to give an explanation or justify ourselves for any reason of saying no. Oh no, but I'm going there. But you can't just say no. So thank you so much for sharing these simple but effective tips for everybody to feel more free and less stressful. Now, Pia, I think we're about to round up. So there is one more question that I would love to ask you, and it's a simple question. It's kind of an open question for you. Like, if you feel like there's anything else that you would love to share here that hasn't been mentioned, but you think anybody should know who really wants to live an authentic life and want to build their legacy and their impact in the world.
You ask that at the end.
It can also be just one word or one sentence.
No, it's such an important notion, this question that you asked, and just around having a like a sort of walking your talk in your life.
Mm.
And one of the tools that I've taught over the years is something called your leadership shadow. And it's based in your values. And what it means is it looks like things like, imagine a person, you know, if you're standing in the sun and you're going to cast a shadow. But in the context of leadership, it's like, what are people saying about you when you're not in the room? Right? And what that shadow is, it's things like, what are you doing on a consistent basis? What are you saying on a consistent basis? And that's all rooted in your values. And so what I wanted to share about that is that don't underestimate your impact in the world. When you get this kind of clarity about who you really are at the core, then that will show up in all areas of your life. It'll show up in that congruency about what you say in any situation. It will show up in your actions, right? And therefore, it creates a sense of trustability about people that work with you, including your clients, etc. And then it kind of comes back to what I said earlier. You don't have to second guess yourself because it's already there. And so, but the point being is, do not underestimate what you have to bring to the world. Your unique gifts to the world. And I very often bring this up. We all have a unique fingerprint. And that's because we are unique. Nobody is like you in the world. Nobody has been or will ever be like you. And therefore, don't waste this opportunity to really know who you are at the core, and therefore bringing all those gifts in the world, because people are waiting to receive who you are. Be it the way you bake in your bakery, or the way that maybe you're a coach or a trainer, or maybe you are a data program. It could be anything. Your gifts are needed, but it takes that inside job to find that clarity. And that's, I suppose, remember your leadership shadow. What all that you are, people take notice and they appreciate it.
Wow, that's a great answer, Pia. I'm not going to say anything else because I think the message was so clear and loud for everyone. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Please let us know, first of all, what are the places that people can find you and your work if they would love to know more about you?
I would say the easiest is to send them to LinkedIn. And my LinkedIn is my name, pia.muggerud. Or you can also look for the same name on Facebook. I'm just in the middle of getting a new website, so I'm not going to send them to any website right now, but you'll definitely find me there.
All right, awesome. That's awesome. So guys, please follow Pia on LinkedIn or Facebook. I will definitely drop her links in the show notes below. And then Pia, I would really love to thank you for all your insights that you brought to this conversation, for your energy. And then also I would love to look forward to meet you anywhere around the world. Hopefully soon if we can meet.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? I'd love to come to Portugal.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll show you around here. I'll have some pretty cool bars.
What are you doing next week? No.
Yeah.
No, and thank you also for, I just think that thought leaders like you, and you're bringing other thought leaders in. I think that's just a really important way for all of us to learn and to find new ways to show up in the world. So thank you also for creating this podcast and doing the work that you do. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. It's my pleasure. And I'm really grateful that you could come on the Dream Builders podcast. So
thank you.
Thank you.